Today we're going to take a look at the 2025 Plants of the Year from Proven Winners. Lists are always good, and this is going to be a great list for you of some of the plants that Proven Winners feel are top performers in the various categories that we're going to be talking about today. So I'm excited to bring you probably around 10, maybe 12 plants or so that are the top picks for 2025. Hi, I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings, and it's always so fun to see which plants have won the title of the year. And Proven Winners has been doing these plants of the year now for, I don't know how far back it goes. I would say it's been probably 7, maybe 8 years now. And it's always really neat to see what was chosen as a specific plant of the year for each of the categories. So we're going to start off with annuals. Obviously, annuals are a plant that grow just during the immediate growing season, like from spring until fall, depending on where you're at. Now, some of you in the South have you're lucky, you can grow an annual year round. But for us here in Michigan, which is where Garden Crossings is located, we're a zone 6A. So annuals really only look good for us here from sometime in May through, depending on the year, October. And this year's pick is I'm not surprised at all. It is the Supertunia Mini Vista Yellow. So for those of you who are wondering, what does Mini Vista mean? So Proven Winners has their Supertunia series, and within that series there are a couple other series. So there's the Vista series, there's the Mini Vista series, and then there's a few others as well. But what Mini Vista means is the flowers are just a little bit smaller than the Vistas. They are a little bit more compact in habit than the Vistas, but both the Vista and the Mini Vista have excellent landscape presence. So if you are looking for a petunia that is going to do fantastic in the landscape and one plant gives you a ton of coverage, look into the Vistas or the Mini Vistas. So Supertunia Mini Vista Yellow is a very vibrant, bright yellow coloration. So I was excited when they added the Mini Vista Yellow to the collection a few years back, because there had been some other yellows, but they were just either a little bit soft or a little bit muddy in my opinion, where the Mini Vista Yellow is just a nice, crisp, clean, bright petunia to add to the collection. So I did mention that the Mini Vistas do well in the landscape, but they also do well in container combinations and hanging baskets. So they're very easy to grow. They like to be grown in full sun to part sun locations. One rule of thumb that I do like to tell people, and this is really true of almost all annuals, if you're planting annuals, the saying is feed them and they'll be fabulous. So we recommend feeding your annuals with your favorite water-soluble fertilizer. We like the Proven Winners water-soluble fertilizer, and that's what I use at home. Feed them and they'll be fabulous. It keeps the plants healthy all season long. You can water them, as they need it. But plants, like people, do need to have nutrition to just keep them in tip-top performance and looking good all summer long. So you can pair the Mini Vista Yellow with your other favorite petunias or Superbena or Superbells for cool mixed combinations, or just plant it as a standalone plant to give you that really beautiful splash of color. They get about 12 inches tall and can spread up to 2 foot wide. So definitely one plant does a big job in the garden and covers a lot of ground. The caladium of the year is the Heart to Heart Blushing Bride. Now, caladiums are another annual plant. I call them tropicals because here in Michigan, they look tropically and they act tropically. And whenever I go down south, I see them down south. So to me, that's what I call a tropical plant. Heart to Heart Blushing Bride can be grown in full sun to full shade locations. So for us here in Michigan to grow a caladium in full sun, usually it has no problem at all. Now, for those of you in the South, you might be thinking, Heidi, you're crazy. You can't grow a caladium in the full sun. Well, for you, then I would recommend probably more your part sun or part shade locations in your garden. The Blushing Bride features shades of green, lime green, white, and just a beautiful magenta color. So I would call it a tricolor foliage going on. They can be grown in the ground. They can be grown in container combinations. They make an excellent thriller if you're looking to do the thriller, filler, spiller kind of recipe when you're putting your containers together. They're just, they're wonderful because they don't cycle. The flowers, they don't really have flowers. Their foliage is just gorgeous all summer long and really complements any annuals that you might plant with it. I like to tuck them in my shade garden, so I have a huge hosta garden, and I'll just go ahead and poke a few caladiums here and there just to kind of break up the garden a little bit, to break up some of those greens by adding in the nice pink shades. And that's where I find I like to use them most, is tucked in my shade garden. The perennial of the year is the Jack of Diamonds Brunnera, or Brunnera. I don't know. I feel like we all maybe have different ways of saying the same thing, and I always will get corrected if I say it wrong. But I don't know. I don't know if it's like how you see a word, it's how your mind says it, or if it's geographical. I don't know. I always call it Brunnera, but I get corrected. It's Brunnera. So Jack of Diamonds features really large leaves, beautiful big leaves that are green, and they have a beautiful gray veining or overlay on them. In the spring, they have just these dainty little periwinkle blue blooms that are really iconic of Brunnera or Brunner. Also, sometimes people say, oh, they look like forget-me-not blooms, and they sure do. They look a lot like the forget-me-not blooms. So Brunnera is hardy in zones 3 to 8, so likes to be planted in that shade type situation. Maybe a little bit of part shade if you have some filtered sun that comes through. I think you could get by with that as well. They like to be planted in average to fertile soil. So a lot of times if you have like a hosta garden, they would be great tucked in along with those hostas and such. They make a great border plant. You can use them in container combinations if you like to use perennials. It's kind of a fun idea, mixing some perennials in your container combinations. Also a great plant if you're just looking for something to plant in mass. You just want this mass of beautiful spring color from those periwinkle blooms. But the nice thing is once they're done flowering, is you have that foliage that will take you through the rest of the growing season. So kind of a plant that has two jobs, the flowers and then the foliage, giving you gorgeous summer color. Now, the hosta of the year, this is one I am not surprised with at all. I love Shadowland Miss America. When I was first out in the trial gardens, this was probably a couple years ago now, and at Walter's Gardens, they have gorgeous trial gardens there, and especially really beautiful hosta trial gardens. They have a lot, I mean, a lot of hostas, and we've done videos on the hosta garden before. But when I was walking through the garden and I saw this Miss America, I was like, whoa, what is that plant? And it wasn't even the foliage, although that is gorgeous. It was the flower that really took my breath away. So as I was walking through, I saw this flower spike that was nearly as tall as I am. I'm 5'9", and that flower spike was up to my shoulders. It was huge. And it was like, hello, look at me. Don't look at anyone else in this garden, because there was no other flowers that were flowering that were anywhere near the height of the flower spike on Miss America. So Miss America, its foliage gets about 19 inches tall and can spread up to 4.5 feet wide. This is a big hosta. Now, the leaves themselves aren't as big as some hostas can get, but just the size of what this plant can get in the landscape, it is a big hosta. So make sure you're leaving plenty of room to let it continue to just grow as the years go on. It is hardy in zones 3 to 9, which hosta they're a very versatile perennial to grow in the garden. So if you have a shade or part shade area and you're just like, what can I put here that's easy to grow, doesn't take a lot of maintenance, hostas definitely would be a good selection for that. Now, one thing I will say, hostas are not deer resistant. So if you do have deer in your landscape, hostas are probably not well suited for your garden. So do keep that in mind, that you would want to have a garden that is free of deer if you want to really enjoy hostas. in your landscape. The next plant is a Nepeta, and it's cat's meow. A couple years ago, cat's pajamas was the landscape plant of the year, and it's a more compact habit. But cat's meow is a little bit bigger and just has more presence in the landscape. Now, I know a lot of people, are familiar with like the Walker's Low Nepeta or catmint, and that one is an old variety that just it does not do good. It's tall, it's really tall, it splits open, and just it doesn't have very, in my opinion, good landscape presence. Cat's meow is a little bit more compact than that, definitely has much better landscape presence. It keeps a nice tidy habit, it doesn't split open as some of the older varieties did. So definitely, if you're looking for long season color, cat's meow is a good choice. So it will bloom and then it might cycle a little bit. Sometimes what we'll do is we'll recommend giving it just a light trim and letting it reflush and flower again. Usually it takes about 7 to 10 days or so from a nice trim to having your buds and blooms starting. So cat's meow is hardy in zones 3 to 8, so really a good landscape plant for most areas of the country. It is a top selling perennial with fragrant flowers and fragrant foliage. In addition to being long blooming, it's also heat tolerant, and it's a great perennial if you're looking to attract the pollinators such as the bees, the hummingbirds, the butterflies to your garden. Also, this one is deer and rabbit resistant, so if the critters do seem to be a problem in your garden, you don't need to worry about that with a cat's meow. Now the flowering shrub of the year, this is a beauty. It is the Centera Double Blue Lilac. So if you like the look of traditional lilacs, those big, huge blooms, those old-fashioned blooms, the Centera Double Blue is going to give you just that. I know when you have gardens, a lot of times there are different plants or different scents or just different things that trigger memories when you are in your garden. And I think lilac is definitely one of those plants that triggers memories of maybe grandma's house or grandma's garden. So if you're looking to plant something that might create memories to future generations, Centera Double Blue Lilac would be a great thing to choose. Now it's not a short lilac. It does get 6 to 8 foot tall and 6 to 8 foot wide. So it creates a big mounding ball of beauty. And usually here in Michigan, we're a zone 6A. Lilacs will bloom sometime in May. So an early bloomer that really kind of kicks the season off here in our gardens. Now Centera Double Blue is hardy down to zone 2. So a very, very hardy cold tolerant shrub, and can be grown up to zone 8. So pretty good spectrum even for those of you that are in those extremely cold areas of the United States. Lilacs are also deer resistant, so if you do have deer issues, that's not something that should be a problem if you are planting lilacs in your garden. Now they do bloom off of the old growth, so if you do feel like you need to do any trimming on your lilac, we do recommend doing so after it is done blooming. So don't wait until the fall. You want to get that trimmed as soon as it's done blooming. That way you don't need to worry about sacrificing the previous or excuse me, the next season's blooms by trimming it too late in the season. And of course, if you're looking to take a few little snippets or bouquets of lilacs into the house, it makes an excellent cut flower as well. The next plant we're going to look at is the Rose of the Year. Just a few years ago, the Reminiscent series was introduced, and I would say if I had to compare them to a rose that maybe some of you are more familiar with or our series, the David Austin roses would be what I would most kind of match up these Reminiscent roses to. Reminiscent coral is definitely one that when we are out walking the trial gardens and we see a gorgeous blooming rose, it usually is one of these Reminiscent roses. And specifically coral is a very, when coral is blooming, you're like, that's got to be coral. It's just, it stands out. It is such a beautiful, vibrant bloom. A heavy petal count, great fragrance. The plant gets about 3.5 foot tall by 2 foot wide, so more of an upright columnar type habit. Another thing with Proven Winners is adding roses into their color choice series. They're looking for excellent disease resistant as well. So if you're looking for a rose that has great disease resistance, these Reminiscent coral roses are definitely something to add to your collection if ease is what you're looking for. They're also heat tolerant, so that's a nice thing, especially if you're in a hot area. Hardy in zones 4 to 9, so definitely they've got a very big spectrum of areas where they can be grown. Now, the Reminiscent roses do bloom off of the new growth, so if you feel like you need to do any trimming on your rose, or if you want to just trim all the flowers off to put them in a bouquet, that's okay. It'll put on new growth and it will reward you with additional flowers throughout the season. So that is one nice thing that's nice with the Reminiscent roses, is they do continue to bloom throughout the summer. Now, what would be a list without a hydrangea? The hydrangea of the year is the Little Lime Punch Panicle Hydrangea, also known as a hardy hydrangea. And the reason I say this is because the panicles or the hardy hydrangeas, they bloom off of new growth. So one of the most often questions we get asked is, why isn't my hydrangea blooming? And a lot of times it has to do with when the plant was trimmed. It was trimmed at the wrong time of year, so you cut the buds off, you lost the blooms. Well, with these panicle hydrangeas, they bloom off of the new growth. So they're very easy to grow. They're reliable bloomers. You don't have to worry about, did I trim at the wrong time? They can be trimmed in the fall, or they can be trimmed in the spring, kind of whenever works for when you like to get out in your garden and do your trimming. They like to be grown in full sun to part shade locations. They get about 3 to 5 foot tall and 3 to 5 foot wide, so creating a nice mounding habit. Now, when I give you those ranges, I would usually plan on the higher end of the range being the mature height of the plant. So although they may be at 3 foot for a year or so, they will probably get up to 5 foot tall when they get to their mature state. They're hardy in zones 3 to 8, so definitely they're a cold tolerant hydrangea that can handle cold winters. And they're gorgeous. The blooms, they start off as a beautiful white. They're big blooms, beautiful white. And as that bloom ages, it takes on just the most gorgeous magenta color. We have them here in our trial gardens at Garden Crossings, and they're always one that people are talking about when they're out walking through the gardens. And that's something I'd like to invite you. If you are ever in the Zeeland, Michigan area, we would love to have you stop out to our retail garden center. We have huge trial gardens here, beautiful gardens to walk through. We like to call it our living catalog. So if you are looking to see, like, what do plants look like in an actual landscape setting, come on out and visit us. And if you're not in the area, that's okay. West Michigan is a beautiful place to visit, so we would invite you to come out and visit us. And actually, we have an event going on June 14. It's a Saturday. It's an all-day event. We'll put a link down in the description below, where we would love to have you as our guest and be a part of our, what we call our Garden Crossings Signature Garden Showcase. It showcases so many of your favorite, not only proven winner annual perennials and shrubs, but a huge collection of plants. So we'd like to invite you to that as well. So Little Lime Punch makes a great border plant. You can grow it in a container. You'd want it to be a big container. And it's also a great plant if you're looking to do cut flowers or dried flowers. I know for myself, I like to take some of these flowers and cut them in the fall and dry them to use in my winter porch pots, which I'm sure you've seen some of the videos if you've watched our channel at all. Of me using the hydrangeas in our winter porch pots. So not only are they beautiful in the landscape, they also are great indoors and for uses later on in the season if you are somebody that likes to do those winter porch pot creations. The landscape shrub of the year. Now this is a plant that may have flowers or it may not have flowers. So it doesn't always mean the landscape plant of the year is going to be flowering or evergreen. But this year's choice was the North Pole Arborvitae, or Thuya. So the North Pole is a great plant, especially if you are looking to have year-round interest in the garden. Because it is an evergreen, it does not lose its leaves, so there's always something going on with the North Pole. It likes to be planted in full sun to part sun locations. It can get about 15 foot tall and about 3 to 5 foot wide. So it's a great plant if you're looking to create maybe a natural hedge or fence in your yard. So my neighbors, they have these arborvitaes along the side of the property line, and it just gives a nice park-like feel. It creates privacy for them, but yet is very natural looking because of the evergreen foliage. They're hardy in zones 3 to 8. So again, pretty cold tolerant for most areas of the United States. They're easy to grow. One thing I do like to say though is you want to make sure that you do keep them watered. You don't want to let them get dried out. So that would be the one thing, if I had to say something, is just especially even in the winter for us in Michigan, like we get enough snow and precipitation that it keeps them watered through the winter. But you can tell in some seasons if we don't get a lot of precipitation, sometimes we do notice that they will go a little brown, and that's just a sign that they didn't get enough water. So just making sure they stay good and watered is kind of the one thing I would say would be a tip that I would have for you to keep them, looking gorgeous. Now, you can trim them up from the bottom if you want to, and we'll put a picture up on the screen where this has been done. This is something I would wait until the plants are pretty mature. In the garden, we're going to show you, they put a fence up, a deer fence, to keep the deer out of the garden. But they wanted to kind of create a little character with their North Poles, so they trimmed them up, I think about maybe 7 or 8 foot or so. So they look more like a tree than they do a shrub, and it kind of gives it kind of a fun, different, whimsy look. So just a few things that you can do differently with these evergreens if you want to is trim them up and kind of give them that tree form look. Now, some of the recipes of the year, these would be taking annual plants and combining them into container combinations and or hanging baskets. So we're going to look at 3 different container combinations that maybe will give you some inspiration if you're looking for fresh, different ideas of what you can do in your planters this year. The first one is Vista View, and this is a combination that we've planted. We've done this combination for a few years now. As the name implies, Vista View. This is a mix of the Supertunia Vista petunias. So there's bubblegum, which is a beautiful bright bubblegum pink. If you're not familiar with bubblegum, that is the top selling annual. Also Supertunia Vista Snowdrift, which is a very crisp, clean, pure white petunia. And then my personal favorite, the Supertunia Vista Jazzberry. So with this combination, it's planted kind of as a 1-to-1 ratio. So depending on the size of the container or planter that you're looking to plant these in, I would recommend 1 of each or 2 of each. Now, being part of that Vista series, these are some of the most aggressive petunias in the Supertunia collection. So sometimes, if you're a patient person, less can be more. So in a 12-inch basket, you easily could get by with 1 of each of these 3 plants. Now, if you're an impatient person, maybe you want to put 2 of each of them in. But definitely, if you are looking to save some money, you can easily go 1 of each of these. And I would even dare say up to a 16-inch container or planter, and you'll get the fullness that you would look and hope for with these plants. Now, these don't have to just go in a container or a hanging basket. These combinations are also good in the landscape as well. So sometimes people do like to have a mixture of plants kind of planted in the landscape, and this would be a great trio to put together. Just plant them about 12 inches or so apart, or you could even go closer, and then that way the plants will kind of all intermingle, and you'll have a trio of color in about a 3, maybe 4 foot spot in your landscape. The next container combination is called Ireland. And to be very honest, I've never grown this combination before, partly because it's not my colors. And when we pop the color, we'll pop a picture of the plant up on the screen. You'll be like, no, if you've listened or watched me at all, you'll be like, no, those probably aren't Heidi's colors. But I do think it is kind of a very unique blend of the plants that they're using in this container combination. So this would be a full sun mix, as were the Super Tunia Vistas we just showed you. And in this, it's got the Bidens. It's the Goldilocks Rocks Bidens, which are drought tolerant and heat tolerant annuals. They're mixed in with the luscious basket Tangelo lantana, another great plant that is heat and drought tolerant, and the hummingbirds love lantana. And then there's also some Super Bells over Easy mixed in, which is a nice white and yellow Super Bells. So basically, if you're looking to put this recipe together, this one I would look and recommend doing as I'm going to tell you here. So I would recommend one of the Luscious Basket Tangelo. Plant that right in the center. That's going to be your, realistically, your biggest, fullest, your most floriferous plant in this container combination. It's going to have a little bit of an upright habit, slight trailing, but a lot of upright going on. Then I would do two of the Goldilocks Bidens. So the Goldilocks Rocks Bidens are going to hang out more. They're going to be more your fillers. And they're going to fill in nicely, but they're not quite as aggressive as that lantana. So that's why you'd want to do two of those plants. And then also I'm going to recommend two of the Super Bells over Easy as well. Now those are going to be the plants that kind of fill and spill over the edge. So when creating combinations, it's always nice to have what I like to call your thrillers, your fillers, and then your spillers that hang over. So this will be a nice mix of yellows, oranges, and whites. More of a drought tolerant container combination, and definitely something that if you're looking to attract the hummingbirds to your garden, the Ireland combination should do just that. Now we're going to look at a container combination that's a little bit more suited for more your part shade gardens. And this one's called Champagne Toast. All right, ladies, get out the glass of champagne and let's toast to this beauty. So Champagne Toast is a mix of the Double Delight Blush Rose Begonias. Also, it's got the Sweet Caroline Medusa Green Sweet Potato Vine and the Silver Falls Dichondra. So very much a different and unique blend of annuals. So the Double Delight Blush Rose is going to be, I'm going to call it more of a filler spiller. So it's going to kind of hang out and then they're going to kind of dangle over the edge. And then that Sweet Caroline Medusa, that's going to also be a filler spiller. And then the Dichondra Silver Falls, that's definitely going to be a spiller. That's just going to add a lot of really cool trailing interest to this container. So how many plants of each should you use? So you're going to start off with one of the Sweet Potato Vine Medusa planted right in the center. That way as it grows, it can kind of find its way out and over. Next, you're going to plant a triangle of the Double Delight Blush Rose. So just kind of make it a triangle around that sweet potato vine that's in the center, and that will kind of fill the edges all out nicely. And then two of the Dichondra Silver Falls, and if you want, put a third one in. I probably myself, I would put a third one in because I'm thinking, you know, I've got the triangle of the begonias. Let's kind of create a star shape of three more of the Silver Falls to just nicely trail over the edge. I will say though, don't go any heavier on that Medusa. One Medusa is going to be plenty for this container combination. Now I would plant this in probably a 14-inch hanging basket or container, 14 to 16 inch. And that should be probably the perfect size for this blend of plants. Definitely a very fun and unique look. We've done something similar to it, not exactly this one, but something similar to it, and it's been really hot in the garden center. The customers have really loved the look of this container combination. If you have any questions or comments on any of the plants or the container combinations we talked about today, I would love to hear them from you. Please feel free to leave them in the comments below. And if you are new to our channel, we welcome you to subscribe. We look forward to bringing you a whole bunch of fun and useful information in 2025. During the winter, it's going to be a little bit more of the sit-down type format because there's not a lot going on out in the greenhouses right now. But we will, if there's fun things going on in the greenhouses, we'll make sure to take you for a behind-the-scene tour because I know so many of you love to know what's going on in the winter. And although it seems like maybe not a lot's happening, there is a ton happening in preparation for bringing you your plants in the spring. Thanks for watching. I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings.